If I say that a single strike from the sky changed the history of the church, it sounds like a legend. Until you open the map, see the round crater, and compare the dates with Constantine's campaign. Next, we check the other stories that are usually whispered at the altar. A house that seemed to fly, ancient blood that flows, bones in gold, dark Madonnas, Antarctic ice with air from the past. This video will surprise you, and you'll want more. Hi friend, you're on the Kurtop channel. The Panagurishte treasure is a ritual bowl, part of the famous Panagurishte treasure found in 1949 in southern Bulgaria. The artifact, made of 23-karat gold, weighs 845 grams and is 25 centimeters in diameter. Rather than the usual ribbed petals, the craftsman created 73 miniature Nubian heads, placing them in 6 concentric rings around the central recess for wine or oil. The bowl, owned by Odrysian King Sevtos III, was likely used at feasts, showing ties to the Hellenistic world. Images of African barbarians served as exotic decoration and symbolized the king's overseas gold power. A fingerprint from the past. In Jerusalem's Temple Mount sifting project, archaeologists washed soil taken from the Temple Mount slope. A tiny clay bulla appeared among the soil, an ancient seal used to close bags or vessels. It has a 13-millimeter diameter and bears the inscription, belonging to Yediah, son of Asiyahu. The writing style and carbon dating date it to the late 7th or early 6th century before Common Era during the First Temple period. Asiyahu is mentioned in the Bible. If this is the same person, the seal may have belonged to his son, suggesting even high-ranking officials' families could join official affairs. On the back, the owner's fingerprint remains, a rare personal code of an ancient official. The surface was examined with reflectance, transformation, imaging, several lighting angles, then a 3D model of the inscription's relief. The find is important because it links a biblical name to physical evidence and confirms Judea's administrative system. On the eve of the Babylonian destruction of the temple at the Triangular Shield, 20 kilometers southeast of Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, archaeologists excavated a rare Roman watchtower. Its foundation is an equilateral triangle with sides about 7 meters long. The dating by coins of Emperor Caracalla is the end of the 2nd century AD. This is unusual for the Roman Empire. Most outposts were square or circular. The question arises, why a triangle? The narrow tip of the tower faces the slope, so a battering ram or stone slide along the wall without destroying the masonry. Inside, they found a stone frame, a well, and remains of a wooden floor rebuilt during the Byzantine period and the Second Bulgarian Empire in the 12th century. Similar shapes appear only at the border with watchtowers. The Romans called these border systems limes, referring to the ramparts, roads, and fortresses along the border. In Bulgaria, this is the earliest example of irregular planning. Instead of the standard template, the engineers chose a layout that fit the mountain terrain more precisely. Today, the tower is part of the Irvich Museum complex. It shows that Roman builders were able to deviate from standards when local conditions required it. Where did the Ark stand? Shiloh, in central Israel, was the main sanctuary before the Jerusalem temple. Excavations uncovered a rectangular building's foundation measuring 31 by 15.5 meters. The exact proportion is 2:1, and the orientation is strictly east-west. These are exactly the parameters described in Exodus. Before the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary that was a mobile tent temple. Inside, they found a large partition splitting the space into the sanctuary and a separate room like the Holy of Holies, where tradition says the Ark stood. The main evidence isn't in the walls, but in the number of sacrifices. Over 100,000 bones of sheep, goats, and cattle, dated to around 1,201,000 before Common Era. In 97 cases, the carcass's right side faces up, matching the book of Leviticus, which gives the right part to the priest. This profile isn't typical for an ordinary settlement, but is normal for a cult center with regular sacrifices. So far, this is not proof of the location of the Ark as an object. Archaeology supplies what texts lacked: precise dimensions, orientation, layout, and kitchen remnants of the ritual. There are too many coincidences for this to be just an ordinary courtyard. It looks like the address of a sanctuary that for centuries was searched for only in books, a guide to exorcising a ghost. In the British Museum's storage, there was a palm-sized Babylonian clay tablet from around 1500 before Christ. Only under certain lighting did the engraved image become visible. The ghost of a man with bound hands being led by a woman holding a rope. On the reverse side is a cuneiform text, deciphered by philologist Irving Finkel, providing detailed instructions to bind and banish a restless spirit. The steps are: make 2 wax or clay figurines, 1 male for the ghost, 1 female for the companion. Beer, bread, and a wooden bowl are set before the figurines, as incantations invite the spirit to accept the offering and depart. After the ritual, the figurines are wrapped and buried at dawn, marking that a new home for the soul has been found and it will not return. The text uses the word mashkim, meaning watcher, which refers to a spirit that has not found peace. The tablet enhances our knowledge of Babylonian medicine and magic. Treatment used herbs and administrative actions related to the dead. The artifact's main value lies in its rare combination of illustration and instruction for Mesopotamia. This is a visual manual for a priest-exorcist, showing that 3,500 years ago, people were already developing step-by-step protocols for dealing with what we would now call psychological trauma. A city without walls. Near Hradec Kralovo in the Czech Republic, archaeologists uncovered a 62-acre Celtic settlement, roughly the size of 25 football fields. Coins and pottery indicate it's from the 4th century before Christ during the Late Iron Age. The culture is identified as Latin, which is the general name for the style of weapons and ornaments common among the Celts of Central Europe. There are no walls or ditches, which was unusual then, so defense depended on trade connections, not fortifications. During the excavation season, archaeologists collected 13,000 bags of finds, bronze and iron brooches, glass beads, gold and silver coins, pieces of amber, and high-quality ceramics. Amber came from the north via the so-called Amber Road, a land route between the Baltic coast and the Adriatic. Development peaked in the 2nd century before Christ. In the 1st century before Christ, the inhabitants abandoned the settlement without evidence of fire or attack, likely due to changes in main trade routes. Today, the excavation is known as one of the largest Celtic sites in the Czech Republic and shows how the economy could replace fortress walls. Troy-era armor. Archaeologists in South Moravia, Czech Republic, found bronze items, including a rare 3,200-year-old breastplate. The plate, measuring 40 by 30 centimeters, covered an elite warrior's chest. The surface features raised solar discs and a triangular pattern with power and protection symbols. The BRNO museum team used a 3D laser to scan the fragments and digitally filled in the missing parts. The model showed that the armor weighed about 1 kg, and the edges were bent inward to avoid injuring the wearer. Inside, traces of organic material, likely leather lining, remain. The breastplate was found with a spearhead, sickle, and several bronze rods. Such a set is rarely accidental. The researcher believes that the items were hidden as a ritual offering, thanking the gods for harvest or victory. This is only the 2nd such find in the Czech Republic. The last was over 50 years ago. Bronze weapons in that era were a handcrafted technology. The foundrymen would first create a wax mold, then pour in a copper and tin alloy, and polish the finished blade to a mirror finish. Each piece of armor represents the workshop's signature and confirms Central Europe's high craftsmanship. Long before the arrival of the Romans, a meteorite changed the course of Christianity. Abruzzo, Central Italy. Roughly 100 kilometers from Rome in the mountains is Sorrente, a round lake about 140 meters wide. Geologists think it's a meteorite impact crater. Radiocarbon dating of charred wood from the ejecta gives a date of around 312 AD, which is the time of Constantine's battle at the Milvian Bridge. The Swedish researcher Jens Ormo suggested a simple version. A bright fireball and a mushroom-shaped dust cloud could have looked like a shining sign in the sky. Eusebius of Caesarea described a vision of the cross and light, after which Constantine ordered the symbol to be placed on shields and won the battle. Calculations give an energy of about 1 kiloton, which is comparable to a small nuclear warhead. The flash was visible from afar. In archaeology, indirect evidence includes a 4th century abandoned village catacomb mass burials and local legends of a sun star splitting oaks. There's no direct evidence linking the meteorite to Constantine's vision. It's just a hypothesis, but the matching dates, scale, and visibility make it highly convincing. A natural event may have prompted the decision to legalize Christianity across the Roman Empire. Incredible jewelry work in Fylkesvestland on Norway's west coast. During the burial mound excavation, archaeologist Søren Danehoff found an item in the 1990s seen only about 20 times in Scandinavia. A tiny Roman gold pendant from around 200 AD, just 2 centimeters wide and a few grams in weight, crafted with detail finer than a human hair. In Rome, such items were worn as earrings, while in the north they were turned into pendants. The burial mound stood out for its size and its location on the top of the ridge, richly heaped up. The analysis of the soil and accompanying finds, such as glass beads and metal belts, confirmed that it was an elite status female burial. The next day, Danehoff unearthed 2 more silver fibulae. These are brooches or pins that held a dress on the shoulders. Such pendants are mostly found in northern Germany and Danish islands. Only 3 exist in Norway. Scientists suggest that the jewelry arrived through marriage alliances between noble families from southern Scandinavia and the western Firdauf region. Modern jewelers admit that it is possible to replicate the work, but it would require years of training and more gold to compensate for the waste when making jewelry for dukes. Archaeologists found a 14th-15th century gilded silver jewelry fragment, 3 by 2 centimeters in the moat of ruined Kolnu Castle in southern Poland. A thin plate with a setting in which a lilac amethyst has been preserved. Researchers Lech Marek and Beata Miazga conducted Raman spectroscopy and confirmed that it is natural quartz with an iron admixture. Most late medieval jewels are found in treasures or burials, but this one was a positive find. Here, the item was most likely dropped when entering or leaving the customs castle of Duke Borislav III Berjeski. The shape and quality of the craftsmanship suggest 2 possibilities: part of a round brooch, a fibula, or an element of a crown. Back then, stones were selected for more than just beauty. Amethyst was seen as a talisman against poison and betrayal, so it was often part of princes and church prelates' regalia. Jewelry should be worn when the blood becomes thin. Naples Cathedral draws crowds 3 times a year as the bishop lifts a silver reliquary with 2 sealed ampules, turns them, and the dark mass inside typically liquefies before everyone. This is the liquefaction of St. Januarius San Gennaro's blood, the city's patron saint. The dates are set. September 19th is the Day of Remembrance. The first Saturday in May marks the transfer of the relics, and December 16th commemorates survival from Vesuvius's eruption. If the blood does not liquefy, Neapolitans take it as a worrying sign. The chronicles link years of failure to plague, earthquakes, and financial crises. St. Bishop from Benevento was executed circa 305 in Pozzuoli. Legend says a Christian woman collected his blood in vessels. In the Middle Ages, the relics ended up in Naples in the chapel of San Gennaro. There are 2 ampules kept, a larger one with a brown substance and a smaller one that's almost empty. They cannot be opened, so direct chemical analysis is impossible. The Church describes the phenomenon, but does not provide an official scientific explanation. Scientists believe this is thixotropy. Some gels become fluid when shaken or heated, and thicken again when at rest. Chemists have created lab samples of blood-like mixtures using iron oxides and gelatin proteins. With slight palm warmth and movement, they shift from gel to liquid. There are also simple explanations: the cathedral's temperature, constant reliquary rotation, and natural aging of its contents. The ampule composition is secret, can't be analyzed, and hypotheses can't be directly verified. Why does it work? For believers? The ritual takes place in front of everyone. The priest lifts the ampules at the altar, tilts them. The dark substance begins to flow down the glass and becomes lighter. Even those in the back rows can see the process. To Neapolitans, this isn't a chemical corpse, but a symbol of the city's protection. A reasonable compromise. Scientists suggest possible mechanisms. The Church gives this meaning, and tradition maintains the community's trust. Altai mummy, Altai burial mounds, Pazyryk. Thanks to the ice, the 2,500-year-old person's skin has been preserved, showing nearly faded tattoos. Scientists re-examined them, looked at the images under different lighting, studied the pigment, and recreated the techniques on models. It turned out something unexpected. More than one person worked on the tattoo. On the right arm, deer and big cats are depicted with fine lines and precise anatomy. This shows a master's skill. The left side's simpler, uneven geometry is likely from an apprentice. This is the first convincing case where several artists are identified on one body. The pigment is regular soot, the tools are a single needle for outlining and a comb, several needles on a bar for quickly making dots and shading. This combination explains the depth and texture of the lines under a microscope. The incisions made during mummification cut through the tattoos in some places. This means they weren't preserved for ritual purposes. Tattoos were common, showing status, group ties, or individuality. The Iron Age community structure was visible on the skin. There are masters, apprentices, and a need for complex body ornamentation valued in life, not after death. The drone saw the ancient city of Romania, Județ Neamț. A 5,000-year-old fortified settlement was discovered in the dense forest, hidden from view by tree canopies that conceal its ramparts and ditches. A lighter laser scanned the terrain through foliage to create an accurate elevation model. Drones flew overhead as a site plan appeared on screen. On the hilltops, there are closed lines of ramparts and deep ditches stretching for hundreds of meters in some places. These are not random mounds. The defensive lines block the ridges, entrances are controlled, and inside you can see terraces for housing and workshops. You can't handle this much earthwork without organization. A team is needed. The project and the time spent checking on site confirmed the model. In the cross-sections, there is a cultural layer and charcoal for future dating. Archaeologists begin with mapping, then conduct targeted digs guided by ramparts and ditches. The site marks the shift from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age. Fire, people, and dogs. Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, Gerstowitze district. Archaeologists found 12 deep pits up to 2.5 meters deep, dating to 3,400 to 3,050 before Christ. This is the Salzmunde culture, a local branch of the funnel beaker culture. The finds suggest recurring rituals, not just ordinary refuse. The pits contain charred structural remains, intact ceramic vessels, and both human and dog bones all in one area. The dog was preserved anatomically intact with traces, and later a human skull was added nearby. This means the pit was opened and reused. Elsewhere, a household stove became a grave for two people, with cremated bones showing burning before or during burial. Why a dog? In ancient beliefs, they were guides to the other world, so their presence next to human remains is logical. For the transition ritual, objects and bones are organized. These aren't spontaneous burials, but organized events with fire, dismantling structures, and partial reburials. Timing is important. The Neolithic ended amid climate instability and neighboring community pressures. Crop failures and competition for land could have increased the need for ceremonies dedicated to ancestors and the household fire. Therefore, the stoves in parts of the houses become part of the ritual as a symbol of the community's life. DNA and isotopes will reveal if these people were locals, the origins of the dogs, and if the dogs belonged to one family or came from various settlements. The Mysore king, an electrician from the Mysore Principality, which is now Karnataka in southern India, Krishnaraja Wadeyar IV, is remembered more for his reforms than his palaces. He became king at 11 and started ruling independently at 18. His personal fortune was estimated at $8.5 billion in today's money. But the luxurious diamond collections did not go into the treasury, but into development projects. The main step was the Shivanasamudra Hydroelectric Power Station in 1905. It was the first hydroelectric power station in Asia, and because of it, Bangalore became a city with electric lighting earlier than many European capitals. When the construction lacked funds, the Maharaja sold part of the family jewels, including a diamond tiara, to complete the Krishnaraja Sagara Dam. He broke caste barriers, banned untouchability, outlawed child marriages under 8, and made primary education compulsory. He gave a quarter of government jobs to non-priestly elites and personally funded education for widows and children with disabilities. Mahatma Gandhi called him a saintly king. Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of British India, noted, "If you want to see what modernization should look like, look at Mysore when drawing conclusions." In 1940, the Times stated, "A ruler whose equal in public affection and effective governance is rare in the 20th century." A ritual cargo from the Philippines. The island of Guam on the western edge of the Pacific Ocean is 2,300 kilometers east of the Philippines. Archaeologists found microscopic rice traces in red pottery in the Ritidian coastal cave. Radiocarbon dating shows an age of 3,500 to 3,100 years. This is the earliest evidence of a cultivated plant being brought to such a distant island. The key evidence is phytoliths, tiny silica structures that retain the shape of leaves and husks after the plant decomposes. The team from the University of Guam and the Australian National University examined the pottery shards using micro-computed tomography scanning and petrographic analysis. The shapes of the phytoliths matched those of Asian rice varieties. No field cultivation tools or irrigation signs are present, so the grains weren't brought for farming. Researchers favor the ritual baggage theory. The rice may have been used in ceremonies or symbolize settlers' ties to the Mariana Islands. This is the only known pre-European use of rice. On other remote atolls, the plant wouldn't appear for 2,000 more years. Rice discovery shows Pacific's first seafarers didn't just drift, they planned routes and brought their culture, even items they couldn't grow on new shores. The Flying House. In Loreto, Italy, in March, visitors can see the Holy House. 3 stone walls that legend says angels brought from Nazareth in the late 13th century. The legend details the route. First, the house landed on the hill of Trsat, now a district of Rijeka in Croatia, in 1291. Then, in 1294, it appeared in Recanati, and after several moves, it took its current place on the ridge of Loreto. That's where the name Flying comes from. You can tell from the house that it's not made of stone, and the mortar matches what was used in 13th century Palestine. Pilgrim crosses and scratched inscriptions, common in the Holy Land, appear on the blocks. The house sits directly on the ground with no foundation, as if it was brought here fully built and just set down. The dimensions of the room match those that medieval descriptions attribute to the house of Mary in Nazareth. And now let's talk about how it could have ended up in Italy. After the fall of Acre in 1291, the Crusaders and those associated with them transported relics by sea, saving them from destruction. Documents from that era mention the Angelus family, the Byzantine Angelus dynasty. Simply and beautifully, the Angelus who funded the transport became the angels who moved the house. The move near the Nadi River is described matter-of-factly. The shrine was moved several times, first on private plots, then on a neutral site, until it was surrounded by the current stone shell of the basilica. Where is the line between mysticism and history here? The church embraces the miraculous tradition, drawing millions of pilgrims, while archaeologists and historians remain cautious. The material and technique suggest Palestine, and assembly traces show it was transported in parts. In the 13th century and in the 20th century, Our Lady of Loreto became the patroness of aviation, which is symbolic for a shrine that once flew. A warning at the entrance to Olympos Port in Antalya Province, Turkey. Archaeologists uncovered the mosaic floor of early Christian church, number 1, from the 5th century AD. A Greek inscription remains on the threshold. Only those guided on the path may enter. The short phrase served as a kind of test of conscience for parishioners, even before they crossed the threshold. The mosaic uses 8/4 of an inch limestone glass cubes and features stylized vines and palmettes, a common Eastern Roman Empire motif. The titers' names, wealthy townspeople who funded the work, are listed in the field's corners, revealing Olympos's social makeup. Sponsors in late antiquity show a trading city's prosperity. Large pithoi, clay vessels built into the floor for storing grain and oil, were found beneath the mosaic. This is a sign that the temple also served as a food storage facility for the community. The city was abandoned in the 12th century, and the inscription hasn't been seen since. The discovery shows how church enlightenment and architecture merged religious services with practical tasks, using brief entrance texts as a clear access system for believers. The Sumerian myth about the trickster. In the British Museum storage rooms was an unremarkable 4,400-year-old clay tablet, NI 12501, from Nishir in modern Iraq, dating to early dynastic Sumer. Recently, Assyriologist Yana Matushak deciphered the text and drawing, visible only under angled light. This myth fragment features the god lord Endel, his son Ishkur the storm god, and the fox messenger. According to the plot, Ishkur ends up in the underworld. Rain vanishes on earth, crops fail. Endel summons the gods, but none will go for the captive. A small, agile fox volunteers. In the illustration, he walks forward with tied paws, a convention demonstrating risk-taking readiness. The remaining lines describe how the fox tricks the lords of the underworld, pretends to drink their wine but hides in a jug, distracts the guards, and helps Ishkur escape, though the tablet's continuation hasn't been found yet. The story of the earliest examples of the trickster, a hero who uses cunning where strength is powerless. The tablet is important in two ways. It records the connection between climate fears and weather gods, and it shows that the image of the cunning fox already served as a lesson about the power of intelligence. Books bound in human skin. In the 19th century in Europe and the United States, there was a rare but real practice of binding books in human skin. Experts call it anthropodermic bibliopegy, literally a book bound in human. Usually the skin came from executed criminals or anatomical theater patients. 1837, Boston, United States of America. Bandit James Allen requested his skin be used to bind his memoirs after his death. On the cover it says in Latin, "This book is made from Allen's skin." 1830, Devon, England. Ratcatcher George Cadmore poisoned his wife and was executed. His skin was later used to bind a John Milton poetry collection in 1882 France. A countess who died of tuberculosis left her skin to her fan, astronomer Camille Flammarion, to bind the first copy of his book Terre du Ciel. Regarding entire collections, the Harvard Library in the United States has at least 3 volumes bound like this. One 17th century treatise contains a note about Eunice Ryder, whose skin was removed on August 4, 1632. The John Hay Library in London confirms a medical atlas by Vesalius with a brown human cover exists. The motives varied: crime memory, souvenir rarity, scientific interest. Legally, this was a gray area. Criminals' bodies were often given to surgical schools, and any remains were used for leather. These bindings aren't displayed or destroyed. Institutions view them as historical artifacts showing how far people went to create unique additions. Skeletons in jewelry. Imagine an altar in a Bavarian church where a skeleton lies in a glass sarcophagus, covered in gold, gems, lace, and even a wig. This is not an art installation, but a relic from the Baroque era. In the 17th and 18th centuries, ancient bones were taken en masse from the Roman catacombs and turned into radiant patrons of cities in Germany and Switzerland. This was the Catholic response to the Reformation when many relics were lost. A strong visual gesture was needed to unite the community and bring back pilgrims, just as they used to do. Rome issued papers of authenticity, essentially a certificate stating that the remains were indeed from the catacombs. A new name, such as Valentine or Candide, was often given. On site, the bones were assembled into a complete figure, and the missing parts were supplemented with wood and wax. Glass eyes were placed in the skull, then silks and lace, gold and gems were put on top sewn by nuns, resulting in a radiant heavenly warrior in a gilded casket by the side altar. This worked on 3 levels at once: faith, the city gained its own holy patron, and politics. The Counter-Reformation showed the wealth of the Catholic tradition without long arguments or economics. The church became a center of pilgrimage. What about authenticity? Radiocarbon tests date some relics to the 1st, 3rd centuries. So the bones themselves are indeed ancient. The status of martyrdom is not always provable, and the jeweled casing is entirely the work of craftsmen. During the Enlightenment, many of these figures were put away in storage, but today they are gradually being restored and displayed as monuments of both faith and art. The conclusion is simple. What we have before us is neither a cheap fake nor a pure miracle, but a rare fusion of religious ideas, Baroque taste, and urban identity. What do we see in the altar display? A relic, a tool of its era, or a Baroque show? It appears to be all of the above, as these skeletons still draw attention and questions today. Champagne at the bottom of the sea. A May diving expedition near the Polish Hel Peninsula brought a double discovery at a depth of 77 yards. Instead of the sought-after World War II submarine, Baltitech specialists stumbled upon two 18th century sailing ships lying 2 kilometers apart. The first ship carries green glass bottles and stone jugs. The analysis of the liquid is still ahead, but based on previous experience, some of the bottles are sure to contain champagne and natural mineral water from Selters. At that time, it was considered almost a medicine and was supplied to royal palaces, including St. Petersburg. The second ship, built at the end of the 18th century, has a well-preserved hull. The Baltic's cold and weak currents slow wood decomposition. Both objects are located right under the modern shipping route, so raising them to the surface is unlikely. Archaeologists will use robots and photogrammetry. The discovery confirms the busy trade between the Baltic and Northern Europe. Russia long before steamships, and it shows that the bottom of the shallow sea remains an archive where commercial voyages turn into time capsules. Ice that is 1.2 million years old. In the laboratory of the Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven, Germany, scientists are cutting the oldest ice core on Earth, a cylinder 10 centimeters in diameter and 2.8 kilometers long, retrieved from an altitude of 3,200 meters. At the Concordia station in Antarctica, radioisotope dating indicates an age of over 1.2 million years, which is twice as old as the previous record holder. European project for ice coring in Antarctica, 800,000 years. Air bubbles preserve ancient atmosphere. Geologists want to know why, 1 million years ago, Earth's glacial cycle shifted from every 41,000 years to about every 100,000 years. Comparing carbon monoxide, 2-methane, and dust levels gives direct data on how greenhouse gases relate to temperature. An extra surprise at the basal mark. The drill broke through a thin ice layer and pulled up a granite piece. This is probably the upper edge of the Antarctic basement, and geologists will have a chance to date when the continent became covered with ice. The first results will be available in a year. This core will give scientists a long timeline from the past and make climate models more accurate when we talk about the rise of carbon monoxide, too. Black Madonna. Icons and statues of the Mother of God with dark faces are found across Europe, attracting thousands of visitors. There are several reasons, and they are different for each image. In old churches, candle soot coated paint for centuries, and oil varnishes yellowed and browned. Restorers sometimes remove the top layer and see a lighter palette underneath. That's how the Madonna of Montserrat darkened. In Catalonia, many city icons also darkened, which never left the smoky interiors. Medieval masters often used dark wood, and painters picked dark tones to emphasize antiquity and solemnity. In Poland, the Częstochowa Mother of God has a dark face, partly due to restorations after damage. The result is the same. The gold halo draws the eye to the deep skin tone, making the image stand out. Why did such icons become miraculous? Antiquity and endurance had an effect. The dark face seemed to have survived fires, wars, and thefts, showing the image remained with the people. Preachers recalled a line from the song, "I Am Black," and they heard it clearly as a sign of humility and mystery. To the pilgrim, this was a face marked by wounds and salvations, not just a museum portrait. A theory exists about traces of ancient goddesses like Isis. It's striking, but with no direct evidence. Historians remain cautious. Usually the reason is simple. Soot from candles, darkened varnish, or dark wood. Centuries of prayers, oaths, and gratitude create fame and miracles. There is another layer of meaning. The dark face is seen as universal, making it easier for people of any nation or skin color to accept. That's why such images became centers of major pilgrimages in Montserrat, Częstochowa, Rocamadour, and Einsiedeln. Melting houses, liquid blood, and a meteorite that transformed religion, this is only the start. Subscribe to the channel because it's only going to get better. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.